everyone, and welcome to a special video tribute as part of our series on Title IX education, awareness, growth, you name it. We have two legends with us. We have Margie Wright and Yvette Girouard, and we're going to talk about the past, the present, the future, and all things. I know most people know you all, but give us the history lesson. We'll go one at a time here. Margie, you can kick us off of how you came to be a softball player slash coach slash advocate, and the little history of you and how you came to love the sport.
Well, I made the boys' baseball team and wasn't allowed to play because I was a girl. So my dad started a softball team, and I played for 34 years at the highest level. And I got into coaching when I was, able to go to college, played 3 sports without scholarships. It was before Title IX. And then started coaching at high school, coached at Eastern Illinois, Illinois State, and Fresno State for a total of about 40 years career, and retired in 2012. Moved back home to Illinois. I have been a volunteer coach for Illinois State with Melinda Fisher for the last few years. Now I'm kind of a consultant, and that's about it. Now I'm doing shows like this, and I love it.
That's the shortest thing of like an all-time amazing player slash coach I've ever heard. Y'all are too humble. You're too humble. We'll let you talk about each other later. That'll be better. Coach Girouard, how about you? How did your story begin?
Well, you would have needed a month for Margie's story. So
I would have.
She was trying to help your listeners there. My story is like Margie's in that we're pre-Title IX babies, so couldn't play. I was the best kid in the neighborhood. I played with the boys all day long till my daddy whistled for me to come home. And when the boys went to T-ball, their first league, Yvette couldn't play. They all asked, "Where's Yvette? She's the best player, but she can't play." Well, my little town didn't have anything for girls. I didn't play anything organized until I was in high school. We had volleyball, and that was it. And then I went to the University of Southwestern Louisiana, now Louisiana Lafayette, and they had volleyball, and I was a walk-on, and I played all 4 years. And of course, like Margie, there was no scholarships. We drove our own cars to the games, and I tell this story, it's pretty funny. We rented, that must have been when I was a senior, and we might have had a little bit more money. We rented a sleeper bus, and we actually drove, our coaches drove from Lafayette and picked up the LSU volleyball team and went to a tournament. I'm not quite sure where anymore. I can't remember where we went, but that's one of the funniest stories ever, because, the two schools, they don't really like each other too much. So that was funny, big rivalry. But anyway, then I graduated. I started playing softball, slow pitch softball when I was about 19. There was no fast pitch softball. I'd never seen the game. I walked up one day to a men's fast pitch game somewhere, and I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. Because I grew up a baseball girl. My dad was a huge baseball man, played minor league, semi-minor league ball. But we took every summer vacation to Houston, Texas to watch Colt 45s, then the Astros, and they were never my favorite team. But anyway, we went there every single year. So that's kind of, what I knew about baseball. So when I graduated from college, they started fast pitch softball in Lafayette Parish. Yes, it's parishes, not counties. And we started softball, and I was the original head coach at Lafayette High School. Every girl on my team tried to pitch in the middle of a game. When we finally got an out, we went behind the dugout. People tried to pitch. That's my beginning. When I coached for 4 years in high school, and then USL called and said, we're going to start a program. And at that time, I'd left teaching, and I was involved with my parents in our restaurant in our little town of Girouard, Louisiana, where I grew up. And so I took the job, and for 10 years, I was part-time. I worked in the restaurant, and I worked, I was the head softball coach. That's where Patrick Murphy comes in. But anyway, we were together for like 5 years, but coached there for 20 years, turned down the LSU job a couple of times. And when they came the third time, I thought, time to take care of Yvette now. And it was the same retirement system. So everything transferred over, and coached there for 11 years and retired in 2011. And that was about 35 years spent on the softball diamond.
Well, and a wonderful career for both of you, and still making change. And if we can go all the way back, Margie, in talking a little bit about some things that people might not be familiar with, specifically oh my goodness, AIAW days. And, Illinois State was a mainstay, right, in those days. And tell our listeners a little bit about the precursor to the NCAA tournament that so many know so well, and your experiences with the AIAW.
Well, AIAW was the women's side of the NCAA when I was in college. I played 3 sports and never got a penny for playing any of them because there weren't scholarships yet. But Illinois State was really ahead of its time because, we had some tremendous coaches and administrators at Illinois State, Dr. Lori Mabry, Jill Hutchison, Linda Herman, Gooch Foster. We had great people there. And we were all walk-ons. And I took a hockey class as I was on the team. I didn't even know how to play. I'd never seen it before in my life, but we were just ahead of our time. And I remember I think it was my junior or my sophomore year, we hosted the AIW National Championship at Illinois State in basketball. And we got our 2 games and we got beat twice by 2 really top teams. But what an experience that was, having 24 teams all come, to Normal, Illinois. And I believe Immaculata won it that year, which was a Catholic school that had some great coaches that were on that team. They became great coaches, after they won it 2 years in a row, with all the nuns filing in their noisemakers. I think they invented the noisemaker rule for all the sports back then. But AIW was unique because we had different rules and a little bit conservative, actually. So I played softball too. And my junior year in softball, we went to the AIAW College World Series where 24 teams would go. And we finished second. And on the last day, I pitched against Southwest Missouri, 7 innings we won. Pitched against ASU, 7 innings we won, but then we had to beat them again. And I ended up pitching 16 innings and losing on an error in the 16th inning to lose the national championship. So the next year, our whole team was returning, and AIW had, in every state, they had what they called a commission. And it was whoever they voted in this commission. No one even knew it existed. But that commission decided that our senior year, we weren't allowed to go to the College World Series because I pitched too many innings. The rule in Illinois was only 18 innings, and I had pitched 30 in a day. And they banned us from going in my senior year. We didn't get to go postseason. Our whole team was returning, and Southwest Missouri State ended up winning the national championship, a team that we had beaten, the year before. So AIW, their heart was in the right place. They tried to do the things they thought were right for the women, but they did have some really archaic systems that, really didn't make sense to anyone. So I think when the NCAA took over, it was a godsend, but they're still learning about women's sports, still today. And I'm really grateful I got to play in the days of AIW because it sort of opened your eyes up, to what the needs are for the NCAA that they've kind of forgotten about, over the years for the women's side.
And Yvette, how about you? When you think about the, transition in the early years with the NCAA and some of those, opportunities, because you both have transcended the NCAA and been present, for modern day, so to speak, Women's College World Series experience, many, many times there, Margie national championship. And, we'll talk about that as well. But what do you remember most about the early part of that event in your coaching career?
First, I want to say that, Margie, yes, she's right. The Midwest seemed like they were so more pro women, certainly than the South, because you hear these stories. I go back and look at all these Midwest teams and how they had been playing and women's sports and everything else. But, now that I do broadcasting, I love to tell the story of pre-Title IX. I tell the story of that. People forget that Louisiana Tech was phenomenal in softball. So when I do their games, we couldn't beat them at USL for years. Stephen F. Austin, I tell this story, they got off the van and I was like, holy moly, there's no way we beating these girls, just the look of them, So all these teams and all these schools that had phenomenal history, when the NCAA came in and people decided to really pour money into it, people forgot that these programs were really, really good. They kind of got left in the dust. But NCAA, as Margie said, there were some archaic. That's unbelievable that they would, again, that's a rule that's probably made from a baseball man saying that you can't pitch these innings. That's kind of unbelievable that she couldn't compete and couldn't do that. But it's not really unbelievable because we both have crazy stories about what was allowed and what wasn't allowed. When I was in high school coaching, they delivered a truckload, and Margie she fought the bitter fight. So she's got her own stories. But when I was in high school coaching, they delivered a truckload of dirt and sand to the guys' baseball field. And I was a first-year coach in softball, and I walked over and I said, how do we put in for this? I need some soil for my infield also. And the guy looked at me and he said, and he was from the parish school board, he said, well, you'll have to prove that you can work hard first before I'll give you this. And, in those days, you kind of just had to stomach it. I kind of wanted to punch him, but you kind of had to stomach it. And so I went out and rented a tiller and tilled my infield for like a week and to show him that I could work. Now, I couldn't raise my arms for like a month, but I was going to show him that we needed this dirt and sand. But, we have so many stories like that. And unfortunately, there's still some out there today.
Well, and I'm sure that's a great segue. When did you first realize, Margie, that there were inequities with post-Title IX, inequities with the program that you were running and the counterparts, whether it was, and so often we go to baseball as the counterpart, and that's not how it works, right? It's not how it works of a sport to sport comparison, but overall in a comparison of what male athletes in this case are receiving compared to your female athletes. When did you first realize, like, this isn't getting better? And what are some of those early memories you have?
Well, I don't think I realized them while I was coaching at Illinois State, because I had been a player there and everything we have is so much better than it was when I was a player. So I don't think it really, sunk in. But when I went to California to Fresno State and pulled in for my interview and saw this beautiful baseball stadium on campus, and then saw the PE field that we were going to have to play on if I got the job, and that we were going to have to rent fencing, and we were going to have to, there were no seats, there was no seating, there was nothing. When I saw that, I thought, okay, this doesn't seem right. But I felt like I was in a place where I could try to make a difference. So I started fighting those Title IX battles, clear back in the late 80s, because there was such a discrepancy, between the two. And I think it really clicked in. I went on campus and I got like the ag department to build some screens for us, because we didn't have any screens and we didn't have it in the budget to buy them, and a group on campus, it was like a student project, and they made us like 5 screens. and they were real heavy wrought iron things. I mean, you couldn't move them very easily, but we had them at our field. And one day when I was coming into work, the former baseball coach was putting him in his truck and taking them over to baseball. And I had to go to the administration. And of course, the administration was not pro women's sports at that point. And I said, hey, those are ours. I got those made, you know. And the athletic director had to go across the street and literally physically remove those out of his truck and bring them back to us. That's when I really realized that the fight was going to be a lot harder than I thought, because we were always asked to do things for free. You know, they wanted us to go get this for free. We were playing midday or weekday games at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, and we were leading the nation in attendance at Fresno State. And so I figured, well, we at least need lights, you know, so I started trying to push, you know, to just get lights, because baseball had them since 1982. And this was like in the, you know, early 90s, late 80s, early 90s. And the university president refused to support us even when we raised our own money. So, you know, I could tell that things were a little bit better, but it was going to take a long time, you know, because you have to change the attitudes of the male sports, the other female sports, and of the fans. You can't have anything exist unless everybody is on the same page. And still to this day, everybody's not on the same page.
Well, and to put that into context for people who don't know, by that time that you're fighting a light battle, you've been to like 6 World Series, right? I mean, because you went, it was like 87 or something for the first time. So you would have been, I should pull it up. You would have been at least 6. It would have been at least 6 World Series.
Well, actually, we had finished second 3 years in a row.
Right.
To get lights. And it was just amazing that you could lead the nation in attendance. You could do all these things on your own. I mean, we really didn't have a big budget. And it was kind of incredible. I couldn't even wrap my head around how they wouldn't want to promote something like that, because it was the best sport on campus at the time. And it was, you know, it was just such a hard battle, because what Yvette and I might see would be like normal because we've earned it, as she had to prove, you know, when she was coaching high school. We earned it. We did everything we could do, and we still weren't allowed, you know, to move forward. It was just like a kick in the stomach, you know, that you can only take so many times. And, you know, then, you know, it kind of gets out of your hand, and you have to go a little bit beyond.
And then, you know, just thinking about this and how long it takes, it would have been some 20 years later that the University of Washington is still fighting for lights, can't host a postseason because they don't have lights, get shipped, and then the next year end up with lights. So you're talking, it took you 20 years from the start of Title IX to get lights. It took another team who is winning at an unprecedented rate another 20 years, you know, to get lights. Why is it so slow? Why?
I don't know why, but in my case, and I think in Margie's case also, they don't want to make that investment, because the bigger and better you get, they might have to support you. And they don't want to do that. It was almost like they told me, you created this monster, you feed it. You know, we don't have this money. But in the meantime, and Margie fought the hardest fight of all, probably of everyone. But, you know, I was born and raised there. That was my school. I went to school there. I played volleyball there. I started the program. It was my baby, and it was home, and I could sell it because it was so genuine. But, you know, after 3 World Series, they brought in a brand new baseball coach. They paid him $20,000 more than me. They gave him a bonus for going to 1 World Series. We had been to 3. And finally I said, okay, I either have to sue him for Title IX or I have to leave. And that's when the LSU job came open. I was like, well, if I sue them, they'll hate me. But I didn't know if I went to LSU, the same thing was going to happen. But anyway, it's all forgiven now. But I just don't think they want to make the investment, because they might have to put some money in it.
Margie, same thoughts?
Well, I think too, change is really hard. In athletics is such a, even though it's a big, it's a big business, it is a small group and of small-minded people sometimes that, God forbid we give the same things to baseball and softball so that they both could succeed. How do they sell that to the old frame of mind of, oh, the men, they earned it. They get to go to the major leagues. They have a future in sports. We need to really put all of our money and everything into that. And I think I agree with Yvette. I just don't think they ever saw women ever having athletics as a career to where they needed to pour money into it to help them become a pro basketball player or, have something that the women, just never had, prior to that point. And I'm sure it was hard for the guys too, when they first started sports and athletics, but they were the only game in town. So it was a lot easier than now having to compete. But here's just a classic example. You could change a lot of heart and minds of fans if you give the right message, but if you are giving the wrong message, it is very difficult. And then it becomes a battle between the men and the women. Once it becomes a battle between the men and the women will not win that battle. They absolutely will not win that battle because there aren't any in administration. There are very few women in administration on college campuses. So you don't even have, that kind of role model support. And the majority of the fans that come to the games are, the dads that want to bring their sons, to games, or even dads that want to bring their daughters to a baseball game, like Yvette and I did, when we were young, because that's the only game in town when we were growing up. So changing that mindset is the hardest thing. And unfortunately, you have to win it all to be taken seriously on the women's side. And I just think that's the saddest part to all of it.
I think Margie just hit it head on. It's the glass ceiling. When I was still coaching and trying to get fans and I had to raise so much money in Lafayette, I'd always say, just give us one chance. Just come one time and tell me that you're not going to enjoy yourself and have fun. I'll give you your money back. Unfortunately, it was the men that I really got involved in the game and tried to make them the biggest, leaders in Lafayette. The community leaders tried to get them to understand that this was the best thing in town, which they did. But it was the men. I had such a hard time convincing women, you've got it. And we still have this problem today. Women do not support women. And until we break that glass ceiling and get more administrators, it's not going to change.
Well, I somewhat agree with that too. I think I was fortunate in Fresno, though. We did have a large group of women that were very helpful, especially once the Title IX battles, began, for us out there. But you're right. When I formed a stadium committee to get a stadium built, I picked every one of my top recruits' dads that owned the business, because the dads, they had the money, they carried the weight. And every one of those guys were on our stadium committee. We met for a year every Friday. They raised $250,000 amongst themselves just to get lights that the president wouldn't let us put up. And that is where you have to go. You have to sell it to the right people. And then you somehow, I do agree that women have a tough time supporting women. But I think I was very fortunate because there was a great group, and we had a female mayor at the time, which was very helpful. And then our next mayor was Bubba on In the Heat of the Night, and he had a daughter that played softball, so it was perfect. For us, at that time, I had a lot of female support. There were a lot of females that were against it, but I think we did have a good group that was very supportive of it. You just have to change the hearts and minds. And Yvette's right. If you come to one game, you'll come back. That's the selling point.
Well, I know for a lot of our coaches right now, the salary debate is so big. And, as we see different salaries in athletic departments just balloon, and luckily you can get a lot of them now, and, you can find them online, contracts and different things. But, just looking at a softball program who's been to a ton of Women's College World Series and has done so many things. The same school in the SEC just hired a new baseball coach, and the softball coach who is established is making 43% of what the baseball coach. And then if you get in the bonuses, the softball coach is making 35% of what the baseball coach is making. So it's a real struggle, because so many times, to Yvette's point, you have to be willing to leave if you want to garner these things, or you have to be willing to risk everything. And what you did, Margie, in your legal battle. So how do coaches manage that? How does a coach who finds themselves in this situation, for example, on the salary side, or a situation of not having resources, how do they manage being a current active coach and electing to fight that fight? Because there aren't many people who did what you did, Margie, and willing to do that, nor would they ever. And I've known so many great mentors that have said, I can't do anything until I retire. And then once they retire, you don't have the same standing that you do when you're a current employee. And so really long question, but I'll go back to you, Margie, and tell us a little bit about what made you make the decision, to file that lawsuit and fight that fight. And, were there days that you wish you never would have done it when it was ugly?
Oh, yeah. Well, first of all, I didn't really file a lawsuit or anything. The Office for Civil Rights chose our school to come in and do a Title IX, inquest. They chose 5 state schools in California, and we were one of them. And what happened was they came in, and all the female coaches, we told the truth. A lot of the people on campus did not tell the truth. And when the Office of Civil Rights came back with their ruling, they realized we didn't tell the truth. So they threw the book at Fresno State at that time. So us getting the stadium was a result of them just choosing our school and coming in. The battle started when some radio program, a guy was against Title IX, did a big program against it. Other coaches went public as being against it. That's where the problem came, was the attitude of everybody in the community, because they were hearing lies like softball's getting a stadium because they stole money from baseball, which was never true. It was a joke. But I mean, I had to file a lawsuit, a First Amendment right lawsuit, against the radio station. And it ended up getting settled out of court. You don't ever get anything out of that, except the radio announcer had to apologize, and he wasn't supposed to do any more programs on Title IX, but he did one the next week, and nobody did anything to him. And of course, he's not around there anymore, but the battle started when they started seeing the stadium go up. And we used a loan from the Bulldog Foundation to build the stadium because they had no choice. They had to build it. And they asked me what I wanted, and I said, I want the same thing baseball has. We even used the same contractor, the same architect. We did everything identical to it, only it was a smaller version. And a guy out of Chicago came out there and built it in 10 months. And then once we got it built, I had to go out and sell seat options to try to pay the loan back. And I was told by the athletic director, you've got to go out and start raising money to pay this loan back. And I did it the whole year of 1997. I would mispractice sometimes because I was speaking somewhere with my hand out, to get money. And we got half of it returned. And I was so tired, I said, that's it for me. I can't do it anymore. When you make the football coach go out and raise money for the new football stadium, then I'll do it for mine. And that was, once I said that, it was a fight of a lifetime. And you get ostracized by people who used to be your friends. I had death threats. I had people follow me home have to be walked to my car because the attitude was I caused the problem because I was the most visible person. And I really didn't have anything to do with it. I was just the recipient, of the Title IX battle because we lied, in that situation. And until this day, until we won the national championship the following year, there were people that would never speak to me. And after that, it was like, okay, she must be okay. They won. And, I got a lot of my friends back and some never came back, but they constantly were trying to get me to leave before I was ready because I was always going to stand up for all the women. I was the only one left. They fired everyone else. So I had to stand up for all the women. And finally, when they offered me to, kind of set my own parameters for how I went out, I decided I'm so tired, I've got to do it. I can't keep fighting the battle, anymore. And so I retired earlier than I wanted, but I'm glad I did because I don't even know where I would be today if I would have survived, that battle or how it would have finished. But they finally, when they were trying to get me to leave, they just took my budget away. They took marketing away. They took everything away from us. And so then we really were fending for ourselves. All the things that we gained from Title IX, they took away. And it was just too much of a battle from that point on. And I was getting too old, really, to do it. So after the 40 years, I just said, I've had enough. And they're still dealing with those issues, once the NCAA did the Power Five conferences, the mid-major schools have suffered tremendously. In fact, Fresno State and ULL Fresno State was the last mid-major school to win a national championship in softball. ULL was the last mid-major to go to a Final Eight in the College World Series. It is very frustrating, as a retired person now who doesn't have any clout, to try to push for things. It's very difficult to watch that because it just gives administrations the right to not put money into things.
Absolutely.
Wow.
Thank
I'm
you.
so glad you're doing this, Joanna. All these young coaches need to hear that story. And so many of us that went through that, I had to raise $85,000 a year, every year, to run our program. And you're just beaten down. But, that's why I left. I saw Margie's story and I was like, oh, mentally, physically, it's horrific what it does to you. And same thing, and especially now in the day of social media, Margie, oh my gosh, you wouldn't have survived.
No, I wouldn't have. That's for sure.
But, I'm going to go off on a little bit of tangent here, and I know football is sacred and I love football, but how much money do we pay people not to go to work in all these athletic departments? It's unbelievable. And then yet the other programs are asked to take maybe a little bit of a cut or to watch their spending. It's just, as usual, we have this all ass backwards.
Yeah.
Tangent.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right. And that's how they justify not financing women's sports. When the Title IX passed, they chose football, men's basketball, women's basketball, and volleyball as the top tier sports for Title IX. So if you were going to remedy Title IX deficiencies on your campus, those four sports were eliminated and they all got fully funded. That's how it originally happened. And then each campus could choose another sport if they had a top sport. And Fresno State, actually, when they had to remedy Title IX, they chose baseball and softball originally. But because baseball and football have so many athletes, they had to drop baseball out of it. And that was another problem because now softball was one of those top tier sports being fully funded and baseball was not. So now it created another kind of competition. But, they're always going to use money as the reason.
Yeah, that was so ironic. They chose basketball and women's basketball at USL, didn't win 10 games in 10 years.
Yeah,
And we went to 3 College World Series and had no budget. So it was just bizarre.
you're right.
And when you think about Title IX, and I think about some of the men's sports who have also a lot of ground to stand on. I've been at institutions where track and field is just treated horribly. They get cross country runners get one pair of shoes. How could you possibly run cross country over the course of a year with one pair of shoes, men or women? And so you think about it, and and obviously the stake in this and is mostly softball coaches, but there should be so many people on campus who should be upset. It shouldn't just be, one. I read a story earlier today that Wright State's president announced that they're going to start 3 new sports to become Title IX compliant. This is 2 years after they cut softball. They're going to add 3 new. So can you please tell me did you think you're going to get away with it? Is that where you thought? And you can't help, you're both nodding your head.
Yeah, they can.
Wonder. Yeah, that's exactly what. And so, and what are, how do you remedy that? So did you have any sense of community, Margie and Yvette, when you were taking on these tasks with other coaches in your institution that should similarly be upset? Or did you find yourself on an island?
Well, unfortunately, there wasn't a lot of money in the program for a lot of sports. Women's basketball got fully funded, but baseball, we were all everybody got more than we got, but it wasn't much. And unfortunately, it creates a huge divide because we were all out there begging for $1 from all the same people. It was horrible. And, I think there was some jealousy and envy because we became so good and everything else didn't. So, I was a part-time coach, so that was probably good because I wasn't there all the time for 10 years, but it does not create a good work environment.
No, I was on an island by myself. My SWA, the women's volleyball coach and the women's basketball coach all got fired at Fresno State. They knew they couldn't fire me, so they fired all of them. And of course, they're all millionaires today because they all filed lawsuits, and I was their lead witness in all 3 cases. And they're all millionaires, but they could not fire me because the fan support was so high, because we were the most successful sport on campus. And so they just made things difficult. But when you're looking for support, when you are in a Title IX battle, you are not going to get it from the other coaches because Yvette is right. There's too much jealousy. There's too much, she has what I want and what I need. Therefore, I'm not going to help her. And they don't come around until you fight the battle. And because you fight the battle, the men's minor sports gain as well. In every Title IX battle I've ever seen, the men's minor sports gain because of that fight. Like at our school, everybody kind of had to be upgraded. Like none of the women's sports had a locker room. Well, now all of a sudden, everybody has their own locker room. All the women's sports had their own locker room, and some of the men's minor sports got their own locker room as well. Because how do you justify it to the men in the community that the guys don't have something the women do? They'll find the money to do it, right? So quite honestly, all the minor sports gain when there is a Title IX battle, but they don't realize it until it's all said and done. And they were resistant, to it the whole time.
So how far do you think we've come? And how far do you think we still have left to go, Yvette?
Well, I think for the student athlete, it's been phenomenal in softball. Oh my gosh, I look at these facilities, they're on TV. From what I see at LSU and ULL for that matter, but mostly LSU. I never see a student athlete in softball maintaining the field anymore. I never see them with a rake. I never see them, which I think is unfortunate. You know, I think for them, life has exponentially gotten so much better. I'm not so sure for the coaches, certainly better than when Margie and I were there. But, you know, the last frontier for softball, or one of the next frontiers, was TV. And now we're all over TV, which is awesome.
Yeah.
The stadiums are incredible. I know that if the guys fly, the girls fly. So that's pretty cool. Wish I'd have had all that, huh, Margie?
Yeah.
Instead of driving those vans for 6 hours, playing a doubleheader and driving back home.
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
Anyway, so in that regard, I think it is. I think for the female coaches with equal pay and benefits, I don't think that's quite there yet.
No.
Margie, what about you? Where do you think we need to go? Where we are still lacking?
Well, I mean, we've made such huge strides. I mean, and we built the first stadium on a campus at Fresno State, and I'm so grateful that we were able to do that, because I do think it enabled all the Power 5 conferences to come up with the money, because none of those administrators wanted to fight the battle of Title IX to build a stadium. So they did it, on their own terms, which was really, really good. And I'm so happy for that. And of course, that does draw television. I mean, I still think the level of skill is where it's been for years. I mean, some of the teams Yvette had were phenomenal. And some of the teams we had, the teams today would have a tough time beating us, I think. It's not that the skill level isn't better. It's just, there's just more of it now. And it's kind of spread all over the place, which is awesome. I mean, I just think it's tremendous. TV was a game changer for sure. But I think we still have to change attitudes of not the softball fans, because the softball fans are always going to tune in now, but you have to change the attitudes of administrations and of your football fans and of people in the community who have supported the men's sports for years. And sometimes in order to do that, you do have to kind of show progress. Like, we wanted to fill our stands when we built that stadium. So I went to one of the local banks and did a deal, hey, you take 2,000 of our tickets, they get to open a free bank account if they buy a ticket, and we're selling them half price. Just come to the opening game. You do have to kind of go out and market yourself a little bit. I hate to say that, but the men do it all the time. They really do. The men are out there all the time. And I do think you have to spread yourself a little more thin to get the recognition from the people who know that you're there, but they don't know you. And usually if a softball coach can go out and sell themselves along with some of their athletes, they'll get some new fans. They'll get some new support. So I do think there is still a need for that. And I think there would be a need for that if you fulfilled all the Title IX battles. If you fulfilled all of your deficiencies, you'd still have to do that in order, to gain what you want. And I do think that the young people do need to learn. The players need to learn and understand where this all came from, because they have it made, and I'm so happy for them, because of people like Yvette and I, fighting the battles. But sometimes, just showing that appreciation of it is helpful, when you're trying to get new people involved. I think that's always helpful as well.
In that regard, I want to go on record as saying Beth Tarina has done just an awesome job of keeping me involved, honoring me. I mean, the start of this year, I got all kind of cards from the current team telling me what I meant to them and the stadium and everything else. So she has really honored me. Is that field in Fresno named after you?
Yeah.
Okay. I was about to say that's a sin if it's not. But you know, the young coaches, you're right about that. You know, it's such a heartfelt deal when you get those cards, and, you know, it seems corny or trite, but it's so true. You know, you cannot forget the past.
Well, and I have to say, Stacy Johnson at Fresno State now, and Trisha was awesome, you know, when she was there at including me on things, Trisha Ford. But, you know, I got the nicest, some of my former players formed a scholarship in my name after I retired. And the young woman who got it this year, she wrote me the nicest note this year, and every year I'll get a note from them that, you know, it was just very heartfelt. It was like, I wouldn't even be able to go to college without this. And I'm the first in my family. And, you know, and I'm sitting here thinking, it's 2022 and this young woman is the first in her family, you know, to get to have this experience. And then I think, well, maybe all of those dead animals on my front porch were worth it, you know, because it's like, you know, here's this young woman that's going to graduate and she's one of their leading hitters, and I mean, it just, the letter, and she hand wrote it. And it was just like, of course, you know, me being old, I like the handwritten stuff, but, you know, it was just so cool, you know, to see that. And so I do think the younger coaches and the athletes, you have to remember where you came from and honor that, you know, somehow, so that it just keeps getting better and keeps building.
See, Margie, it validated everything you fought for, although
Absolutely.
it took a huge personal chunk out of you.
Yeah. Oh, I wish I would have lost some weight when it took that chunk out. Yeah, but it did. It was tough.
You know, one thing we have coming up in April is a lesson plan, a Title IX lesson plan that coaches can take and share with their athletes, that they can learn from themselves. What do you think the most important thing is? I love that you're talking about this, but what do you think the most important thing is that they learn about and that they understand when it comes to the ongoing quest for gender equity? Yvette, you want to start?
I would just, I guess, keep fighting for opportunities for women. And again, Margie and I are old school. I'd sure like to see women continue to be the coaches in this game. You know, guys didn't want the job when there was no money. But we, again, our own worst enemies. It's tough for women that have children to do this job, but I do like what I see, the opportunities now. And Beth, again, has done just a tremendous job with that. She uses her managerial scholarships to, it's not just a manager, it's somebody with a softball background that wants maybe a profession in it. So I think that's awesome. And I think that's why we're seeing so many more young girls involved in our sport again, young coaches. And I'd like that continue.
Whoever thought you'd see managerial scholarships?
No joke, huh?
I mean, you know, right? Margie's over here saying, I played 3 sports, I didn't get a dime, and now you set up the tees.
Exactly. They're getting paid to go to school.
Yeah.
With no disrespect to those receiving it. Fantastic.
Absolutely.
You know, I remember Beth saying, I got another one because baseball got one and I don't know what to do with it. And, you know, because you have to learn how to manage those things. But I digress. Margie, what do you think should be included? What do coaches need to know, and players?
No, I totally agree with Yvette. You know, I wish that we could all understand the concept. And again, it has nothing to do with not wanting men involved in our sport, because
Exactly.
I do. And they are very instrumental when young girls are growing up and playing, because, you know, their moms have other children and they can't coach a summer ball team and they can't, you know, do those things. So I'm very grateful. My dad was my first coach. I'm very grateful to the guys who are involved. But I sure wish the opportunities for younger women were more appealing to them, because, you know, it's really hard if you're getting a job where you're getting 90,000 and you're getting a job where you're just getting a graduate assistantship. What are most women going to choose? You know, they're going to choose that. Other men, on the other hand, may choose the grad assistant position because they have so many options to get a head job. They have men's sports and women's sports to get a head job. Their opportunities are double than what the women are. So I think we have to make it more lucrative for women, for young women to want to get into coaching. And to have the administrations be more supportive of women being in coaching and being a little more open if they are raising a family or if they are the breadwinner or whatever that is. I think that it is really important. But the number one thing I think we have to do, we have to change the mindset of all people that you do not have to take away from the men in order for the women to be successful. That is still there. It is still out there in athletic departments, and we need to get rid of it. We need to find a way to split the money to where you can make everybody happy. And, you know, that doesn't mean you get to have a whole practice squad in football. That means you may have to give up some of that in order to give all the baseball players the amount of money they need, or in order to start another women's sport. The money is there. It has to be put in the right direction. And that's never going to happen until we change the mindset of, you know, equality. Equality is just a word. If we don't do anything about it, it just remains a word.
Well, very true. And it's hard to imagine having, you know, 85 football scholarships and then having 9.9 wrestling scholarships and 11.7 baseball scholarships. I mean, those three numbers just don't add up, and their roster sizes are, you know, huge. And so you think about an institution who wants to sponsor football, baseball, and wrestling. And I'm a Midwesterner as well, Margie. So you go back to the Midwest where those three sports are, they're crucial, you know, to so many schools, where as Central Michigan and South Dakota State, and where I've coached most recently, and they love those programs. But and from so many standpoints, you're already behind the 8 ball. And I've never understood 85 football scholarships. I have just never fundamentally been able to understand for 12. You know,
part of the mentality has to change in the NCAA.
Yeah.
I mean, they are the ones that set those limits. And, you know, so when I talk about the mentality change, those people have to change a little bit too. I mean, why shouldn't you be able to field a full softball team on full rides? And that means 2 or 3 extra pitchers. I mean, why shouldn't you be able to do that? And baseball, it's a sin. Because you have to carry so many pitchers in that sport. It's just incredible how underfunded they are with scholarships. And, you know, so the mentality is not just within the institution, it's from the very top.
Absolutely. And football was at 105 scholarships until 1973. That date's a little familiar too, isn't it? And so it's, you know, I mean, it's a little, it's an interesting one. You know, I have a call with Judy Garman and Joanne Graff later today to have a similar conversation. And when I was working for Joanne, I'm going to ask her about this too, but one thing she said is she was tolerated because she won. And some of the things I'm hearing you all talk about is really similar to that. That has to take just a emotional toll on you if that's how you feel that you're being tolerated because you're successful. What advice would you give to coaches on their own mental health and longevity in the career, and how can they help themselves while they are, you know, pursuing these opportunities for their young women? Margie, I know that has to be something you think about. What advice would you give?
Well, number one, don't take yourself too seriously, because you can only do what you can do, and you can fight for anything you want, but you do have to keep it in the right perspective. And I had to learn that the hard way. But most importantly, I think you have to come to the realization that you're just a human being, and you have to continue to make yourself be happy in what you're doing. The minute you're not happy with what you're doing, for whether winning is the ultimate or, you know, getting more than somebody else is the ultimate, it doesn't really matter what your goals are. You have to make sure you are happy in what you're doing, and be willing to put in the work for it, because it's right there. It's just, you never know how many people you can change just by, one thing that you might say or one action that you might take. You just do what you can do. And that should be enough.
Yvette, anything
Margie?
you'd like to add?
Yeah, Margie's so much more eloquent than I. Balance. Like I had none for a long, long time. So driven with the job, didn't take a vacation for years, but you have to be who you are. You have to be true to yourself. I know when I got to LSU, I was inheriting a far different situation than I think I had ever been around. And I really realized I just had to be me, just had to coach the way I coached. But you have to be true to yourself, like Margie said, and just, be okay with certain things. I mean, you can't be obsessed with just being tolerated by a couple of people when you're really loved by so many others, and just kind of keep that in your rearview mirror.
Yeah, you have to go back to those young women's lives that you've touched, because Yvette and I have had the opportunity to touch thousands. I mean, and it's just, you have to remember those young women that are somewhere that they may never have been were it not for us and the opportunity we gave them.
Absolutely. And it's hard. It's so hard now because I think coaches feel like middle managers more than ever. You have the NCAA and administration on an institutional level, a conference level, making policies and procedures all geared toward the student athlete experience. But to your point, Margie, the one person with the largest impact on the student athlete experience is the coach and the coaching staff. And so you're stuck. And I use this analogy all the time, but it's like the architect and the homeowner are talking, but nobody's looping in the contractor, right? And so you have this internal, external struggle, and it's just it's a really tough time to be a coach. Tremendous profession, so many opportunities, and yet a really difficult, current climate for that. One thing I do want to go back to before we wrap up here, you both talked about the role that males have played in the advancement of women in Title IX and so many things in your own programs and coaches today. And you see things like Kenny Gajewski at Oklahoma State, they do a press release on stadium upgrades, and his quote is, "This isn't enough. This isn't enough until we have what they have," pointing at the baseball stadium. "This isn't enough. We don't have enough seats. We don't." How crucial is that coaches like Coach Gajewski, like Pat Murphy, who are successful male coaches in the industry, use their voice to continue the plight and showing, what these young women may not have? Any thoughts on that specifically?
Well, I think it's great because, once again, the men will listen to the men, and they'll never be considered a B word. And I think it's awesome that these guys are out there fighting for everything they can possibly get, and let's call it like it is. Unfortunately, they may have a little bit more clout right now.
No, I think that's true. I think, when 90% of your administration is male, a male coach is going to have a little more clout, in speaking to them. And I think they will appear more believable or whatever. And I think it's awesome that those guys are fighting for the women that they're coaching. I definitely, think that's awesome. But the one thing I would say to them, welcome to the world of those of us who started in this profession. It's never going to be the same. It's never going to be equal, but we have to keep fighting. So they're living today what we've lived for years. And I hope it comes through for them, because look at how many women they're going to be helping. Even women on their staff, they're going to be helping them too. So good for them.
Well, one last option here to add on. Anything I didn't ask, anything you wanted to talk about, any questions you have for each other, anything that you think that we're missing before we cancel and hang up on this call?
Well, I'm glad that I had the career. Obviously, I'm very grateful for the career I had but I'm really grateful that it happened when it happened. Yes, the fight was continuous and it probably took a toll on me, but I'm so old school. I definitely could not live in today's times. I would have been fired like 5 years ago.
You and me both. We both would have been. And I have to say, you know, being a volunteer for Melinda the last few years, I've gotten the opportunity to see how it truly is, you know, today. And I'm older school than you are, Yvette, and it is hard. It's hard to adjust to it, but you have to. And you know,
Exactly.
it's just the way. It's the way these kids have been brought up. It's the way the softball has kind of functioned, you know, in the last 25 years. And I don't know that I would have gotten into it if this would have been the way it was 40 years ago. You know, I kind of like the blue collar kids that would bust their rear end to run through the outfield fence if you told them to. That's long gone. Every once in a while, you'll find a few that are like that. But good for them that they have what they have. And my hope is that they realize that they have to earn, you know, the respect, and they have to earn more every day.
And they have to keep fighting for the next generation.
Absolutely.
Well, ladies, thank you both so much. We hope that we get to see you in December in San Antonio, and then you know, introduce you to even more coaches that are listening. If something that was said really hits you and you want to know more or learn more, I promise both of these women are tremendous advocates and leaders and mentors, and would love the opportunity to chat with you. So feel free to reach out to them or us, and we can facilitate that if you need anything else. But Coach Girouard, Coach Wright, thank you so much for taking the time, for speaking so candidly, and for helping us understand a little bit more about the 50th anniversary of Title IX, where we are, where we've been, and where we're going. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Go catch some fish, Yvette.
I will. Stay warm, Margie.
I'm going to.
You too.